indict it and try to plead it out if I knew that it was unconstitutional. On the other hand, there will be cases where there is some disagreement in terms of reading the case law and whether or not the facts of that particular case meet that particular criteria or standard set by that particular case or standard. So a defense attorney such as Mark may disagree with the prosecutor, but if we have a good faith basis to believe that the case or the stop was made legally and we think that we can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, then we should indict it. But on the other hand, if we know that it's an illegal stop or unconstitutional, we absolutely cannot go forward with that case. And I would advise the attorneys that I supervise to call the point person for that police department and let them know that we can't go forward and here's the reason why. And please instruct your officers in the future not to act that way.
Jason.
Mark, from my perspective, I'm going to empower my prosecutors who are professionals, who've gone through law school, who've worked in the job for some time. I'm going to empower them to exercise their discretion, and they're going to do what they believe is right. They're not going to get direction from me about how to handle individual cases. But what I would encourage any prosecutor in the office to do is to bounce it off other people in the office, to get some type of consensus or get other opinions, because the law exists the way it does for a reason, and it largely keeps all of us employed. You may say that the text is black and white for any type of certain case law or certain statutes, but there's a great deal of gray in between, and 5 of us could pick up the very same case and have 5 differing viewpoints on how strong some of the issues are in the case, whether the stop is good, whether the search is good, whether the search is unlawfully expanded beyond the scope of the initial stop. I think that's something that we could all debate. If you know on its face that 100%, 90%, 95% that this is a bad case with a bad stop, then I think you get rid of it. You cut your losses essentially at that stage. We shouldn't be indicting cases that we know aren't going anywhere. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of resources. But at the same time, to some degree, that's why the courtroom process, the adversarial process, and why we have a judge up in a black robe who gets to make certain calls. That's why all of that exists. So I don't have a problem on a tough suppression issue, putting it in front of the court and letting the court decide it.
Thank you, Jason. Michael.
Well, Mark, I think there's a lot of stops that I don't think you've ever liked. So, and it's a fact-driven situation, and so you apply the law to the facts, and everyone can view the facts differently, and whether or not it's a strong case, weak case, or no case at all. If it's no case at all, there's not a decision to be made. It goes away. If it's a weak case, then you decide whether you want to take the time, waste the resources, or use the resources to try and push it through the system. But it's an individual case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, if I just have a quick follow-up to that, if I may. We'll go with you, Michael, then to your left. Let's say you do make that executive decision. It's a clear, patent, illegal search, illegal seizure. The evidence is going to get thrown out. You make the decision to not go forward on that case. How do you deal with the, if you will, in this instance, the offending police department? Because you're going to get pushback. You're going to hear, no, my officers know what they're doing. Don't tell me how to do my job on the street. How do you deal with that kind of pushback in a positive fashion, number one, that teaches them what they're doing, and then perhaps teaches the officer not to make that mistake again? How do you deal with that kind of institutional pushback?
Sure. The way I'm going to set the office up is going to be crime team leaders. And so when the associate gets the case, assistant gets the case and says, I don't think there's enough, they're going to go to the team leaders, and the team leaders are going to make a final decision on whether we go forward or not. If they say no and we kick it back to the police departments, then if they want to appeal it, they can come to the deputy or to the county attorney. But I work for 7 police departments. I get kicked back all the time. I see a lot of stuff that never makes the light of day when it gets to my desk. So the first thing I do is I call up who is ever involved and say, we have a problem, let's talk. If you're open, honest, and communicate with everyone in an honest fashion, don't bullshit them, and give them the straight answer of why this is wrong and this is what you need to change, they'll be fine. They always have been.
Thank you. Jason.
To piggyback a little bit on what Michael said, it's really about having an open and honest dialogue. And transparency, as we talked about at the beginning, is something that I'm going to bring as county attorney. There are going to be times that there is disagreement. That's fine. I'm happy with disagreement. I don't mind that. But you need to handle it professionally, and you need to deal with people honestly. You can't be dropping cases and sending letters off to a police department that you hope get buried in a file. Pick up the phone and call and explain what the issue is. One of the things that I want to do as county attorney is to have more outreach with police departments, trainings for police officers, trainings that go beyond what they learned 10 years ago when they got out of the police academy and have had very little legal law training since. We want to give examples for things. If you have a stop and this is your scenario, this is where this one went wrong, but this is how maybe you could have handled it differently, and these are the reasons why. Open and honest dialogue will help cut through a lot of that stuff. And to be able to listen to what people say, not just stand there and say, I know better than you do. You have to have an open dialogue about it.
Thank you. Pat?
I think that communication is very important, and if I had a case where a police officer made a bad stop or expanded the scope of the stop illegally or something like that, I would call the chief, but I would also call the police officer directly and have a conversation with him or her so that we were on the same page and so that they understood why we were doing what we're doing. Additionally, that is one of the reasons why I would like to have these periodic case review meetings with the police departments, because when you sit down around a table and you have a face-to-face conversation about these cases, you pull out a statute or you hand them the case and it says in black and white, you simply cannot do this, and you have a conversation about that. The police officers understand that. And most police officers want to better themselves. They want to do a good job. So when you educate them and you give that information about the law, they're not going to do it again, and they are going to make sure that they do it right the next time. I agree that training is important. I think that the county attorney's office should be involved in training police officers, but I think we also have to remember that there is a New Hampshire Police Standards and Training, and that they are there for the sole purpose to offer training to police officers. And my understanding is that every year they send out a questionnaire to police departments about what types of things their officers need to be trained in. So I think we need to take advantage of that as well.
Thank you.
So this question is to all of you, and I guess we'll start with Michael. You know, I've been a prosecutor for almost 20 years, and there's been an extreme disconnect between the county attorney's office and local prosecutors. Now, 2 of you are local prosecutors, and 1 of you is a county attorney. How is it that you're going to improve relationships with not only the local police departments, but the local prosecutors who deal with, or at least start to deal with, the cases that you're going to handle in Superior Court? How are you going to improve the relations between the county attorney's office and local police departments and prosecutors? Michael.
Good question, Kevin. We're going to set up a system that I use now, actually, in district court. I have a cover sheet which has, you know, the charges, what my recommendation is, what the who the witnesses are, and boxes for, you know, contacted police department, contacted the officer, contacted the victim. And that's going to get emailed to the officer, to the prosecutor, and to the chief of every department that I'm dealing with on that case. Then, if I don't hear back from them in a week, or the assistant doesn't hear back from them in a week, they're going to get a phone call to the officer or the chief or the prosecutor going, what do you guys think of what we're proposing and the disposition? And then we're going to keep a log of every time we talk, and before a case is ever disposed of, you're going to get a call, or the chief's going to get a call, or the officer's going to get a call about, here's what we finally decided on, what do you guys think? Because you know these people better than we do, because you probably have dealt with them a lot more than we have. So we're going to rely on you for a lot of information that's not in the arrest report, not in the criminal record, and then we'll jointly make a decision of how to handle a case, and then you'll be involved in every step of the way.
You ask an interesting question, because district court prosecutors hold a great deal of control over the types of cases that ultimately end up at the county attorney's office. As a prosecutor for the busiest police department in Rockingham County, I know right now that I am probably sending 25 cases at least a month to the county attorney's office, felony cases for indictment. But out of those 25 cases, I'm sure that there are 35 to 50 cases that I am resolving in district court and not letting those cases get to the point that they get to the county attorney's office. I think you've touched on that there's a big disconnect between what's happening at the county attorney's office and your district court prosecutors who work directly for different police departments. You in Londonderry. Derry has 2 prosecutors. Wyndham has their own prosecutor. Salem prosecutor. Greater Brentwood, Epping have their own prosecution team. Portsmouth has 2 prosecutors. There's really no level of direct contact between the county attorney's office and those district court prosecutors, different than, say, what happens in Stratford County. And I don't think we're going to reach the point, I'm not interested in reaching the exact point of where Stratford County is, but Stratford County has essentially stepped down from Superior Court to District Court, and Stratford County Attorney's Office has much more control over what's happening in District Court with District Court prosecutions. I think the County Attorney's Office needs to ensure that their reach does not end at the outside of their office. As county attorney having staff meetings, I would invite all the district court prosecutors to be involved in that. I think there needs to be outreach from the county attorney's office to the district court prosecutors as best as you can to try and have people on the same page and working towards the same goal. But right now, there's a split there.
I will tell you that right now at the county attorney's office, a policy was instituted years ago where district court prosecutors do not have the authority to reduce a felony level offense to a misdemeanor level offense without getting the authorization from the county attorney's office. And there was a number of reasons why I think the county attorney felt that that was necessary. Just as an example, sometimes we would get a case where co-defendants would be treated very differently. For instance, there would be, if it was a burglary case, there would be a driver and someone who actually went in the house. And the person who actually went in the house and did the damage and took the item, for instance, that case might be resolved as a misdemeanor theft, and maybe they were fined. And then the other person who was the driver and waited outside and who has less of a criminal record was sent up to the county attorney's office to be indicted, which really didn't make a lot of sense and it wasn't fair. So I think that was one of the reasons that policy was instituted. That policy may need to be revisited. I would be willing to do that, but I do think we need to have more communication with the district court prosecutors. As I mentioned before, for the area that I run, the Seacoast area, I do have periodic review meetings, and the prosecutors, the police prosecutors, attend that meeting. For instance, in Portsmouth, there are 2 district court prosecutors. I meet with them periodically. We have a very good open relationship communication-wise. Additionally, Seabrook Police Department with Scott Mendes. Right now, Alex Reno is a district court prosecutor in Hampton. I have a very good working relationship with him as well. So again, communication is key. I think it's necessary to run the office efficiently. And I think I do that with the meetings that I have. And again, I would require all of the different areas to have those review meetings and speak face-to-face with those district court prosecutors.
I just want to follow up on that, Pat, because you mentioned that policy. I know I've never followed the policy. I know most or many of the district court prosecutors, I think that we don't follow that policy. And do you want to keep that policy?
I think it needs to be revisited, but I think there needs to be communication. We have to make sure that there is open communication with the prosecutors in district court, so we're all on the same page regarding which cases should be reduced and which cases should not. And when there's co-defendants, they need to be treated fairly. You can't send one up who is clearly the more aggravating defendant and plea out the person who is the more culpable person in district court to a misdemeanor, and then send up the person who is not as culpable and ask that person be indicted. So I want to revisit that policy. I think we need to. I don't think it's efficient anymore. But again, if you have an open communication with these district court prosecutors, it's not an issue. I speak to the district court prosecutors in my area constantly via email, telephone, or in person, and it hasn't been an issue.
May I chime in on that issue?
Oh no, Jason's next. You can come next. You'll be last.
Well, I would just say, if there is a policy in place that nobody's followed, then that's the first policy that's coming off the books as far as I'm concerned. We're going to have policies that we believe in and we're going to enforce. We're not going to have policies on the books that we ignore when it's to the benefit of people in the office that we like. Policies are a policy, and that's what we're going to follow. This policy about whether there is a policy on resolving district court cases with or without the authorization or the blessing of the county attorney, I can tell you that's something I've never heard of. No one's ever told me that the county attorney has that policy on the books. I've never followed it for 5 years, and no one's ever told me otherwise.
Michael?
Oh, I've known it existed, but I don't follow it either. The reason why I think the district court prosecutors and the local police chief and the local officer should make that decision is because they know more than I do. You send one person up for one reason, and they may know what that reason is, and that's fine with me. If they decide how they want to handle a case, they know better than I do because they know the players much better than I do, and that's fine.
I just want to comment on it. I think it's a trust issue, in my opinion, in that the county attorney's office needs to trust the police departments and the other prosecutors and respect them both ways. And that's how I would come down on that. But Mark has more questions.
I have one question for you, and that is from both being on the inside at one time and now looking from the outside looking in, it seems, at least there's a perception, that the Rockingham County Attorney's Office hemorrhages new attorneys, new hires, and younger attorneys. For the last several years, we've seen attorneys leave to go to other county attorney offices, oftentimes taking a pay cut to leave the Rockingham County Attorney's Office. So my question would be, what, if anything, is broken at the Rockingham County Attorney's Office with respect to its attorney retention, and what will you do to change any defects that you see? We'll start with Michael.
Right. I think what's broken at the county attorney's office is what the Health and Human Services Department of Rockingham County found when they made a specific determination that the office is a hostile work environment. Given that, I understand why it's been hemorrhaging for the last 3 years, people running out of that office. The management of the office, and Pat is claiming to be part of that management, has created such a hostile and horrible working environment that people will leave and take pay cuts. That has to stop. And the problem is that people are being treated very differently. If you're in with the management, you love it there. If you're out of the management, you hate it there. That's not going to be the county attorney's office I operate on. I operate on whether you work hard or you don't work hard. There's going to be no in-team or out-team or in-group. It's going to be we're the Rockingham County Attorney's Office, and we act as a unit. I don't care if I don't like someone. If they do a great job for me, they'll always have a job at the office.
Thank you. Jason.
I think among the biggest problems is that the office has not been run from the top down like a prosecutor's office. It's been run as we're more interested in being political and being strong Republicans and bypassing minefields than really trying to do the right job and from the top down. And I'm not painting the entire office and every person in the office with the same broad brush, but that's what the problem has been. The morale in that office is terrible. The place is split in camps for reasons. You need someone that's not tied into that network, doesn't have axes to grind, isn't a product of the problems that are in that office. You need someone like me, an outsider, to come in who's unbiased, not tied into the personalities, to restore